Welcome to the Animator tutorial on how to create animated textures within Animator using just controller scripts in the scene editor. The only way to do this besides from controller scripts is by swapping out multiple objects and multiple materials with different textures assigned to each one. What this script does, it uses one texture and can swap it out for multiple materials or multiple objects. So it's a lot more efficient than the other way that I just mentioned. Now I'm going to go ahead and dive into it. There will be multiple portions to this tutorial, so just continue on to the next video if you wish to learn more. So first we are going to set up the objects that hold the sprites, the animated textures. So let us create a flame first. So what I'm going to do is create a flat plane, 2D plane in 3D space. This is going to have a 1-to-1 ratio of resolution, since this sprite, this animated sprite that I found online and modified a little bit, is a 1-to-1 256 by 256 resolution. So there's that, and now we just extract the front face, detach that face, delete the rest, and then center it about the origin. So now we want to create the material for that face. You can call the material anything you want. What matters is the texture. So load the texture of any file within that sequence. And here you have the texture. This right here defines the texture object, not the file itself. And what's important is to name it something that makes sense that you will reference later on in the controller script. So I'm calling it file1. It does not change the actual file path. This is the file path right here. So we call it file1. What the controller script is going to do is going to swap out the file path for this file1 texture and not actually change the file1 texture in any other way. So we set that up. I'm going to set up the material and apply it to the object. So there is our sprite. It's a plane, 2D plane in 3D space. You can actually apply the animated textures to any shaped mesh. I'm just using a 2D sprite because it's easier for use as an example. So let us go ahead and name this object fire, and we can make a sprites menu for this to fall under. So now it's under sprites, fire. So let's go ahead and create a video screen now using the same method almost. What I did was I captured a video of my desktop just doing a few things, and I saved a sequence of images of that video. So now I'm going to reference that in a new sprite. It's a 16:9 ratio video, so I can just do 64 by 36 and say, let's make it go back a little, kind of more old-fashioned box. Okay, so convert to mesh, and now we want to create a material. I'm going to call it video, and let us load any one of the files within that sequence. And let's rename that texture to video 1, which you will be referencing that name later. It doesn't have transparency, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Okay, that's our video. It's pretty simple. Now, okay. Now we have our two objects pretty much set up. Technically, you could just have this video screen by itself without the box as a separate sprite object, and then make boxes later as a separate object, and just do whatever you want with it. But I'm just going to create this whole thing as one object. Now in the scene editor, let us go ahead and add these two. And I will set up the camera to just face these. Okay, so this is our simple scene. It's all set up, so to speak, in terms of the camera setup. Now, we have to do a lot of other things first in order to get the controller script working. You can't just toss in the controller script and expect it to work its magic without doing anything. So let us open up the timeline. Okay, so let us go ahead and go into the controller script. We want to begin on the flame controller script for now, and then we will move on to the video. You need one controller script for each texture sprite that you're going to animate. What you see here is the base controller script without any configuration, or just your default configuration. So I will create a new copy, and I'm saving it as the .a8s extension because I want syntax highlighting in this editor. If you assign the A8s extension and try to load it within Animator as a script file, it would not load. Just letting you know, I'm just doing this for the sake of the syntax highlighting in Notepad++, which I use as my text editor. So here's the copy. Now you can see that this script is actually pretty simple. There's only maybe, let's say, 50, 60 lines of code that actually do anything. Most of the rest of it is just comments and white space. So it's actually pretty simple. The logic behind it by itself will not load down Animator. It's just the swapping out of images will have a pretty heavy load on the system if you have a lot of sprites going on. What this controller script does is it loads a texture at each frame for whatever it's controlling. So if you have one sprite and you have it set to swap out or to advance a frame in the file, the sequence of images, then it will load at each frame a new texture file into that texture. So this can create quite a load on the hard drive because it's not loading it from memory. It doesn't preload these files. It just loads it from your hard drive at each frame. So if you have just one sprite active, then it's not going to be too bad, especially if the sprite images are not huge in resolution. But if you have a lot of them, then that can be a problem, which is why we have this enabled parameter. For any sprite that you are not working on, you can disable it by putting 0, and for that specific sprite, it will be disabled while you play through the frames. That's the first thing. You want to keep it enabled if you want to see the sprite in action. The second parameter that you have to configure is what is the name of the texture. This is, if we go back to the actual texture object, this is that fire1 or video1 label that we assigned right here. So for the fire, our name of the texture is fire1. So let's go back and do text name equals fire1. Next is the controller float, anim float parameter. Basically what this does is it looks for the animation controller which animates the actual sprite. This controller script is only the logic behind the animation. To actually animate using this controller, you need to set up a separate controller, and that's what this is going to reference. So basically we have to go ahead and create this now. So how I do this is I go to this actual sprite element, and I'm going to rename it fire1 sprite. And now press OK. You can see it's renamed. I'll go to rename the video to video1 sprite. So now for the fire sprite, we want to add a controller. So with this selected, go edit controllers, and you can see that element is automatically selected, and press new, and then go ahead and name it anim controller. You can name this anything you want so long as you remember it, but I name it anim controller because it's easy to remember, and make it a float type, and press OK. So here we go. There's your anim controller. You can animate this to any value between 0 and 1 or higher, and basically any decimal value you can animate, and the controller script will take that value at each frame and use it in its logic to figure out which file it's going to swap out. So we won't do anything with it for now, but instead we'll go ahead and install our controller script. Now, thanks to issues with circular dependency, there are only a few ways to actually set up the controller script. If one controller relies on the data of another controller, Animator has no way to tell which one to calculate first if they're both on the same level. For example, let's pretend this video1 sprite is a controller and this fire1 sprite is a controller. If fire1 sprite value has 1 and video1 sprite decides to copy fire1 sprite's data, you would assume it to be 1, right? If video1 sprite equals fire1 sprite and fire1 sprite equals 1, then video1 sprite should also equal 1. However, what if video1 sprite is looked at first? What if video1 sprite, say, looks at the value of fire1 sprite before fire1 sprite's value changes? That is the issue, well, one of the issues with circular dependency or parallel dependency. You cannot actually state the order of operations between determining values that are shared between two controllers if they are on the same level. That's why you have to create these two controllers on separate levels, and that's what I'm going to do. So now we want to create a container object that holds the controller scripts. So to do that, I use a target. And now you go ahead and call it Sprites scripts, or anything that makes sense to show that it holds all the controller scripts. And press OK. And so there's your container object. And now I am going to add another target and call it Fire1 script. This holds your Fire1 controller script. And press OK. So now I want to go ahead and parent the Sprites scripts target to that. Okay, so it looks much more organized now. If you double click it, it goes into the target. The reason I have to do this, rather than simply going to Sprites scripts and making a new controller and call it, say, Fire1 script X or whatever, then you can see, oh, they're both the same. You know, why can't I just double click this? Just double click this one and edit the script. The problem with that is once Animator has a bug where you can't double click controllers for some reason, open up that same dialog box that I was just in. So you can't edit a controller script after you implement it. So the only way to bypass this is by assigning it to either the location, the orientation, or the role, or the visible. Since these are targets, it doesn't matter if it's visible, rotated, located differently, or whatever, because they do not render in the camera. So I just set it to location. So that's why we have to do it this way instead of creating a actual controller. If Steve fixes this bug, then all you have to do is add controllers and assign the controller script to that controller instead of creating a target. So we'll go ahead and delete this one since it's in the way. And now we want to assign the controller script to the Fire1 script. So just go into the location right here and put on expression, which means it's going to start interpreting whatever scripting that's in this window right here. When you click edit, this window will pop up. Now we want to set up the next actual parameters. Controller swap is the data for swapping out between two sets of textures. For example, if you had a character running and you had that as one set of sprites, and then you had a character walking or jumping and you had that as another set of sprites, you can use this controller, the swap controller, to swap between the two sets of textures and swap between running and jumping using the same sprite object. That's what this is for. But since the flame effect and the video effect do not need this, I'm going to just skip it for now. So text prefix, this is the actual file name. So if we go back to the Fire sprite, there we go, Fire1 underscore 0055.png. That's your entire file name. Text prefix is everything before the numbered portion and without the extension. So it's Fire1 underscore is the prefix. So we fill that out. Now the number of digits in the texture name. So if you count them 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 digits. So 4. It's a PNG file type, so we can leave that alone right here for the text type. If it was JPG, then you want to change it to JPG or any other file type. Now the text path, you have to set this, and it must be the exact location and not, you can't expect it to look in subfolders. So text path, you want to set it either as the exact absolute location, that is, if it's in your C drive, it would be C drive, then your parent folder, and then the next folder, and the next folder until you get to the exact location. If you do a local path, then that means locally or relative to the animator file. So, which is what we want to do, because if you move the folder, then you can just keep it relative to the animator file. It's a lot easier for sharing files or just moving files around without breaking the script. Here we have our tutorial.an8 file, and the sprite is located under Sprites and Fire. So we will be entering that right here. Keep this ./sprites/fire, and you want to end it with another slash. This dot basically represents that it is relative to its location. Okay, so this is the local path to that texture. Now your text starting frame, that is the number right here. So it's 55 is the beginning of that texture sprite. And now the ending is 106. And now we are set. We ignore everything below this portion right here. We copy the entire thing since it's ready to be used. And then we go into Animator. We go into the Fire 1 script, go location, and edit the expression. Press OK. So expression is on, we edited it, and it's right inside there. Now, before you can actually see things happening, you need to do two things. First is you have to go to the Fire 1 sprite anim controller, and you have to actually set the values. So 0 will be the first frame, and let's do 1. Now, I didn't explain this before, but when you go to the actual controller MType, there are two types. One is multiplier, which means it uses the value to scale the animation. So if the value was 0, it would use the first frame. If it was 1, then it would use the last frame. If it was 0.5, then it would use the middle frame. And so any numbers in between will correspond also accordingly. I'm using multiplier since it's easier to animate that way. The other way is through the frame. So you set this to frame if you want to be able to specify the exact frames that play back instead of using a multiplier. And so now when we animate this, going from 0 to 1, it should play through each flame sprite image. And in fact, since the total of 52 images in that sprite, I'm going to assign it to the 52nd frame. So from here to here, it should be pretty close to showing each frame of the sprite. And it's not showing anything now because there's one last setting that you have to really pay attention to. If you don't have this setting, then you won't be able to play any sprites at all. This setting is a controller that is kind of an on and off switch. If you go to Edit Controllers and assign to the world element a new controller called Sprites Enabled, and give it a Boolean data type and press OK, then you have this right here, Sprites enabled, and you want to add a key 1. So this will play back the actual swapping of files now that it's enabled. To disable it, you press 0. Why you have to do this? First of all, it's useful to have an on-off switch for all of them, so you don't have to go into each controller script and disable it. If you want to be able to play back in real time in the workspace, the entire animation, the entire scene without slow chugging effect, you can disable it all that way, and then re-enable it by setting the value to 1. The other thing is Animator has an issue where sometimes it does an infinite loop if it tries swapping out textures within the scene editor. I think this happens because swapping out texture files within a scene editor wasn't a intended capability, but I'm kind of exploiting that, and so sometimes it causes a crash. So if you end up crashing all the time, then you want to set Sprites enabled off and then open up the sprite objects if it's crashing when you open up those objects, and then you enable it again. That's another reason why you want to have this on-off switch. It's not showing the animation, so that means I either put in... Oh yeah, I didn't actually... I skipped something, I think. Yeah. In this file script, there's these parameters you have to set. Controller anim float, I forgot to go back and set it. So under sprite element name, that would be fire1 underscore sprite. That's the name of the sprite element. So fire1 underscore sprite. Now the anim controller name is the same name as the anim controller that we made before. So anim underscore controller. Okay, so now that should be okay. So let's go ahead and re-edit that controller script. So we double click on the fire1 script, go location, and edit the expression, select all of it, and paste Control V, paste it back into that. Okay, so now it should work. It's not showing it. It might be because I have another issue that I didn't see, or sometimes if you had a problem with the script, then it won't swap it out for some reason. So you have to close the entire session and reopen it, and it might refresh it. Yep, so now it works. So that's your animated file. So now we can do the same thing for the video. So I'm going to go through that really fast. I'll just explain as I do it. So, okay. So video 1 sprite, add the controller, make a new one, call it anim controller. This is the controller you're going to be animating. Press OK. So there we go. And now on the sprite scripts, I'm going to add a new target, call it video 1 script. Press OK. And set the parent to sprite scripts. Press OK. And so now we want to animate the position, but now I have to create a copy. I'm going to save this to disk for me to load later on, or do the actual syntax highlighting. Oh, forgot to specify the file extension. Okay. Alright, so now let's go ahead and configure it. The text name, that would be video 1. I'm just doing this from memory. Let's do video 1 sprite, anim_controller. And then let's go ahead, let's do frame, just so I can show you how to do animate between the frames. And now we skip the swapping. The text prefix, that would be seen, because in the texture you see it's seen for the prefix. The number of numbers, there are 5 digits, so keep the 5 digits in there. It's a JPG file, not a PNG file. And now Sprites, it's under the desktop directory. Yeah, keep the / at the end. And the beginning frame is 1, the ending frame is 157. Okay, so this should be it for the configuration of the controller script. So copy all of that, and then go in here. And so again, I double clicked that target video 1 script, go location, expression on, edit, and then replace the entire script with the one you just copied. Okay, that should be that. And now let's go ahead and animate. Make sure you save often, because it could crash sometimes. Just a warning. So anim controller. Now that this controller uses the frames, if the value is 0, then it references frame 1 of the animation cycle. So let's use the first frame. And now let's, even though this is only frame 71, there are only 71 frames here, I'm going to go ahead and specify the 157th or 156th frame, because there we go, I swapped it. Cool. You can see it's very slow now. Like, I'm tapping as fast as I can to advance to the next frame, and that's just as fast as it goes. So again, that's why you want to be able to go into these scripts and enable or disable them by putting 0 right here. So now it's a little faster, but it's pretty slow because this texture is pretty big, both in file size and resolution compared to this one. So, let's just compare it. That's how fast it flips through it. If we disable this one, or enable the file one and disable the video one, then we can compare the speed that it loads. There we go. So yeah, you can see how fast it loads now, just for the file compared to the video. Now we have these 2 videos. They animate pretty nicely. We'll go ahead and enable this again, because when we actually get to rendering, it won't render it otherwise. Okay, that's pretty good. What if we wanted to loop animations? The nice thing about this script is it automatically loops if you set a value higher than the last frame. So if you set, for example, this video script, if you set the last frame to past the 152nd frame, then it will automatically loop back to the first frame. If you don't want this to happen, then just don't let the value go higher than the last frame. So let's go ahead and extend the scene so we can just loop it a few times. Let's do, say, 180. Alright, so approximately 6 seconds. So let's go ahead and set this video anim controller right here. We want to loop this, let's say, do we want to loop this 1 per second? That would be pretty fast. So we want to loop this across 6 seconds. Let's loop this 8 times. Okay, so it's going to play it back a little faster than 1 rotation per second. Oh, yeah, I forgot. This is the frame, so rather than 8, it'll be 8 times 152 frames, which would be 1200 and something, whatever. I'll just use 1400. So yeah, okay, now it's definitely playing back a lot faster. Okay, so now we want to loop the actual flame effect. So let us, how many times do we want to loop this? We want to loop this again 8 times. That won't be too bad, huh? Now there's going to be some frame skipping. If frame skipping happens and you don't want it, then either that means your number of sprite images is less than the number of frames, so it has to skip some frames to advance to the next one, or it's because Animator does not have a linear set. Like, you can see this is a curve, so it's slowly increasing the value here, and then it raises it here. That means this portion here is probably going to be the same frame for a while until finally it gets high enough to advance to the next frame. So what you want to do, you want to try and get this as linear as possible. I wish Animator had just a linear option, because it's kind of difficult to get it exactly linear. So this is kind of a straight line, so there won't be as much frame skipping going on if this was the reason. But either way, it's a lot better than it was before. And now we want to do the same thing for this anim controller for the video, because this curve is going to show it slowly playing the first dozen frames, or first couple dozen frames. It's just going to slowly increase, and then it's going to slow down at the end. We don't want that unless you specifically want that. But I just want linear playback for these, because I'm not animating a slowdown or a speed up effect. I just want straight 1-to-1 effect at the beginning or end. Okay. So now we are set. Now before I begin rendering it, there is something that you guys probably want to do, is create copies of sprites and control them separately or as the same. So what if I did want to do that? Well, it's actually easy to make copies of the same sprite, and if you want to animate them both at the same time. For example, if you had this flame, and you had multiple torches, let's go ahead and let's pretend this is one torch. So what if we wanted to have another torch? Well, let's go ahead and add another fire object, and let's go do 50 or 25, and let's do, yeah, okay, so Okay. That's not too bad. Okay. So automatically it plays it through for each one. It's pretty handy, huh? If you have a flame thing, it doesn't matter, really, unless you have these flames right next to each other. It doesn't really matter if they are flipping through the exact same image. If you want them to flip through it separately, then you're going to have to go through this entire thing all over again. You're going to have to, let's go ahead and rename this eObject1 to Fire2 Sprite. Okay. And then we can just go ahead and add the anim controller. Okay, so now do from 0 to, actually let's go from 0.5 to 8.5. Just offset it so that they both aren't identical. So as you can see, it doesn't do anything because of the animation. The controller script is also still the same. Now, there's another step you have to do if you want these two to play differently, is you have to create a new texture. So if you go to textures, then you have this one texture, but now you have to make a new texture. Call it Fire2. Press OK. Now we're going to keep this one and make a new object. Call it Fire2. Okay. Let's copy this. And then let's set. Okay. So this Fire2 is now set to be Fire2 for the texture itself. Okay. So this should be different from that. Save it. So again, it's kind of bugging out. So now, before we restart the session, we might as well go ahead and add a new script. So add target, call it Fire2 script, and parent it to Sprites scripts, and press OK. And now we can change this. So we have our Fire controller right here. We make a copy of the Fire controller, go inside and paste it, and we just change it from Fire1 to Fire2 in the text name, and that's all you should need to change. So press OK and OK. Alright, so now we save, and if we reload Animator, it should be correct. Let's see, I might have screwed something over, so let's check and see, because they are still identical. Oh yeah, I forgot, I didn't change this, so let's change it to Fire2. There we go. Still messed up. Oh yeah, okay. I forgot you also have to change the element inside. Oh, there we go. It's crashing. This is again why you want to use the Sprites enable thing, because it can crash if you have playback at the beginning. So let's go ahead and close it. Even with all the crashing, it's still worth it to do this, I think, than using it like doing it with the Animator program. It's just better overall, in my opinion. So let's change this to Fire 2 again, save, and change Sprites enable to 0. This way it shouldn't crash when I open this. Okay. So Fire 2 script, there is another thing that we have to edit, and that is right here. This portion right here. Change this to Fire 2 as well. And now it should play back once I enable it. So we'll go over here, save the changes, well, and then put this to 1, and there we go. Now you can see it had to pause, but that's just because of the anim controller being in a curve. So let's go ahead and make this linear again. And then it should animate it pretty smoothly. Yep, there we go. So now they are not identical. They are two separate sprites. So basically, to make two separate sprite instances that are unique, to animate them uniquely, you have to create two whole separate sets of the Fire 2 sprite elements with the anim controller and add a whole nother controller script for that sprite. If you wanted them just to be identical, then you can just make a copy of it in the scene editor. So there we go. And let's save it once it stops going through. And then we can make a render of it. And then we'll be done for this portion. Let's just do that. Okay, now I want to render the movie. I'm just going to save it as AVI because I don't intend to do anything with this in terms of post-processing. Let's also set the background. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and play it. There we go. Pretty good, huh? So, as you can see, this is actually playing pretty fast. For having each second, it loops through more than 152 frames, I think. So, yeah, it's going to be animating fast. So if you want to go to the next tutorial, which shows you how to animate this character sprite to walk and jump, then just go ahead and do so by clicking on the link below this video.